Hi again, Leo Demetrio here from Let It Spin, and joining me again today from Geelong in Victoria, Martin Fawkes.
Howdy, everybody.
And Wes J.
Hey.
Thanks again, guys, for checking us out. Today we're focusing on the 2022 remix of the Beatles Revolver, including the remixes of Paperback Writer and Rain, along with early versions and alternate takes of the Revolver sessions. We'll also be ranking our top 5 favourite tracks from the album. I'm excited because new technology has allowed producer Giles Martin to remix the stereo version of the album, separating each instrument and the vocals, and thus reorganising the original hard left, hard right mix into a wonderful panoramic, crystal clear, enjoyable listening experience. I compared the old stereo version with the new, and the results to my ears were nothing short of amazing. Boys, for me, the clarity and presence of the vocals and the instruments makes Revolver plus Paperback Writer and Rain in stereo a must listen. Martin, what are your thoughts?
The thing that struck me most of all on my first listen through, Leo, was how vital the band sounds. It's like you're stepping into a building next door and hearing a live band going for it. It doesn't sound dated. The songs could come from any moment in time. It could come from today or yesterday or 40, 50 years ago. So thank you, Giles Martin, and we'll talk about this a little later, perhaps. Thank you, Peter Jackson, for making this available to us. It's an absolutely thrilling record. And I think in contrast to some of the other more recent remixes that Giles has overseen, I think this really, as you're alluding to, this elevates previous versions that have been available to us. I think of Sgt. Pepper, and listening to that, the remixes were absolutely fascinating, certainly, but I didn't feel that they replaced, and particularly A Day in the Life. It was an academic exercise to hear the stereo panorama that could be achieved, but I still wanted to, if I'm going to listen to it on a regular basis, I want to hear the original version of that. I think what Giles has done with Revolver is give us an update that is relevant for us in the here and now.
Cool. Wes, what are your thoughts?
I think the whole remix has been treated as individual songs rather than an album. Let me explain. When you go to the beginning of Taxman and then you shoot into Eleanor Rigby, and the perspective of the voices changes on each track. At least to me it did.
Okay.
And I go, okay, the voices aren't in the same place. These are not being considered like Sgt. Pepper was, which was something to play through from beginning to end. But these are more statements of individual songs, a collection of things which landmarks, I guess, in their own way, of largely, to me, there's 2 perspectives of the album. One is the perspective of a pop project, in which case you go, you're looking at the Yellow Submarines, and maybe you're looking at Eleanor Rigby's The Gotta Get Yous Into My Life and Good Day Sunshine and stuff like that. Or how I prefer to look at it is this is a collection of songs which are experimental and just moving what's the correct term here? Moving the level of what people would expect to hear from a pop group. Yeah. This is so different than Please Please Me. And it's in the space of 5 years or whatever it was. This is their 7th album or something, or somewhere in that vicinity. These guys changed music. And this album with the remix, which Giles have come up with, really just emphasizes the fact that this was the record, not Sgt. Pepper, in my opinion, that changed the gear.
Right. Yeah. Good point, Wes. I think that for my ears, the the mono version was where I was always coming from with regard to Revolver.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even go anywhere near the stereo mix. I heard it once and that was enough for me. And I'm so pleased that we're able to get something that resembles a proper, in my opinion, a proper stereo mix of that particular album. And now I gravitate towards that. And it's a really fun experience enjoying the music in stereo.
Mm. I'm intrigued with what you're saying there, Wes. Certainly very experimental. I feel that although the songs are very disparate style-wise,
Yes.
that it still feels to me like the Beatles. So to go from Taxman to On the Rigby, to, even though, as you're saying, the perspective of where the vocals are placed is different, but the through line of the dense vocals and the harmonies gives it the commonality. So that allows to go from like almost pre-punk, highly aggressive guitar rock into Baroque chamber quartet.
Yeah.
But the vocals give us that through line and that connection together. But by the same token, I'd take your point. This was never conceived as a concept piece like perhaps Sgt. Pepper was. So certainly not every song works.
Yeah.
What does intrigue me, I think, is that all these different styles, you can say, well, this is the beginnings of power pop. No, and out of that we've got Matthew Sweet and we've got Badfinger and we've got, you've got this jangly pop rock, which obviously the Byrds were covering Dylan, but they were also playing like the Beatles, some aspects of the Beatles, an aspect of the Beatles. And then you've got the raga rock, which George Harrison was obviously instrumental in influencing, and Baroque pop, which obviously the Beatles had in my life with the harpsichord. And Yesterday, prior to doing Eleanor Rigby, but suddenly pop groups were putting strings and harpsichords and violins into their pop songs. So you could take any stream out of the styles that they were doing here, and whole movements were occurring in different shades, different aspects, different. I just find that fascinating that people could take one little slice, one little piece of the flavour, and create their own meal out of it, their own career out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's have a crack at ranking our top 5 from the album. Martin, do you want to start us off?
Sure. And here's an example: twin lead guitars playing harmony riff part, and Your Bird Can Sing. So how many groups picked this up? Wishbone Ash, Allman Brothers, Thin Lizzy, big melodies, and just so intriguing to me that this was McCartney and Harrison playing the guitar parts together. And great work. I like this one.
Excellent. So that's your number 5, Martin?
And Your Bird Can Sing, number 5.
Yeah, cool. Wes, what about you?
Well, for this purpose of this, I'm taking the position that I'm looking for the more experimental, all right, rather than going the pop line. So it's going to be Taxman, which is the opening cut, and George gets it purely on the basis of those pithy lyrics of his, and instantly it's an earworm. Yeah, away we go. I'm a Taxman.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Wes, Taxman for me at number 5. It's interesting that the Beatles allowed George 3 cracks at it on this album, and Taxman
And the opening. And the opener.
And they made it the opener, yeah. A great song, really biting lyrics. Can't go wrong with a song like Taxman to open things up and show the world that things are changing in the pop music industry. Number 5 for me, Taxman as well. Martin, number 4, mate.
Number 4 is the Schoolyard Sing Along. And as I was listening to it,
Which one?
just it took me back to my childhood, and it's like, yeah, look, it's childlike but not childish. Obviously I'm talking about Yellow Submarine. And fascinating to hear John Lennon's original demo of the germ of the idea. In the town where I was born, no one cared. And it's like, oh, mate, what a wrist-slashing start that became such a cheerful, happy, kind of meaningless. I'm trying to find some kind of Freudian symbolism or Jungian archetype there. I'm not going to unpack that at all.
Well, while we're there, Martin, sorry to interrupt your flow there. You're just talking about John Lennon singing different lyrics to the song. What did you guys make of those sessions that came along with the package? You know,
Look, I didn't. Sorry, pardon.
Yeah, I just concentrated on the original album rather than on the.
Oh, okay. So you didn't get a chance to hear it, hear those sessions? Okay.
Not in any detail, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I picked up on this because this was a YouTube preview of the Revolver remix release. And so it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But I haven't particularly done it.
Yep, no worries. Yep, cool. Sorry, mate.
Yeah. No, bright, cheerful, and a song that instantly took me back to my childhood and, innocent genius in its own way.
Yep. Where's your number 4?
Well, I think I've gone a similar line to Martin, and that is I've gone something that you can sing along to, and that's Got to Get You Into My Life. And like I've gone from Taxman, which is just far more intense, to something here which is totally frothy, so to speak, and full of brass sounds.
Puffy.
A bit of Motown almost.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's my number 4.
Yeah.
Cool. My number 4, probably one that, Martin, you're not 100% enamored with, but Georgie again for me. I Want to Tell You. I really love that song. I love the way it's structured. That off-kilter piano in that song, it just... it begs for repeated listenings, and George is on fire, in my opinion. And that particular song, is one of those that I could put on again and again and really enjoy. So that's my number 4, I Want to Tell You. Martin, your number 3?
Experimental, word Wes used earlier, but I picked a different experiment. And again, hugely influential in its own way with the tape loops and what have you. Tomorrow Never Knows. And what an incredible closer to the record. Just headspace, getting your mind into a different place. One of the things I found fascinating, when you're listening to something like, say, Eleanor Rigby and the strings, and we know that George Martin had his mitts deep into that. But Guitar World did an article very recently discussing the engineer, Jeff Emmerich, who was only 20 years old at the time, and he'd been the tape op in previous Beatles sessions. And the engineer they'd been using had left to become a producer. So they asked Jeff Emmerich to help them engineer and do a lot of the sonic experimentation they've been hankering to do for years. And so Jeff Emmerich did things like putting the vocals through Leslie's speaker cabinet so that the swirly sound, and close miking. So at Abbey Road, they had a rule that guitar amps and instruments had to have the microphone 18 inches from the sound source. So no, he puts the mic right up against it to get this very immediate, very biting sound, and put jumpers into Ringo Starr's drum kit to get a more thuddy sound. and the tape loops for Tomorrow Never Knows. Jeff Emmerich doing for the equipment what George Martin was doing for arranging and instrumentation. So, yeah, amazing work.
Good stuff. And Ringo's drumming on that song, fantastic.
Yes, yeah.
Where's your number 3?
Eleanor Rigby, without doubt. And this boils down to the string arrangement from George Martin. Just what a wonderful arrangement. And, you know, pulling in the string players and just, it's got guts, just got guts. What an arrangement. And it's, yes, there was Yesterday and all that before, but this is just wonderful. And such poignant lyrics too, which is, you know, just beats anything from that period. You know, certainly beats Mrs. Robinson from Simon and Garfunkel, which might be similar themes in one sense. But here's Eleanor Rigby. Who cares? You know, that's what it's saying. Is all the lonely people. Where on earth do they come from? And who's caring about them? And so much more that you can just pull the layers back of the lyrics of that song. So it's there as one of my favourites.
Perfect. Yep, my number 3, Wes, is following your number 4, Got to Get You Into My Life. I'm a sucker for that brass stuff. It's just magnificent the way it's structured and put together, and it's still a catchy pop song. And for me, you know, that's half the battle of enjoying a song. And for me, Got to Get You Into My Life, you know, ticks all the boxes. Number 3 for me.
Yeah.
Martin, number 2?
My number 2 is Taxman. And what a way to open an album. Statement of we've got something to say, and, you know, government getting their fingers in our pie. How dare you? And Beatles came from the working class, very privileged by people by this point. So it's a little bit, I don't know, confronting. I don't know. Some pundits I've read over the years say that maybe George, when he wrote it, was listening to the theme from the Batman TV show. So I looked it up. I looked up the dates, and sure enough, Batman TV show started in January 1966, and this record came out in August 1966. So it's possible that they heard that song, but I don't know. I don't
Maybe
think
he liked the Monkees as well.
Hey, we're the Batman. I don't know. I can't see that, you know. Yeah, look, it's a tenuous connection, but yeah, great song. I like it. I've come pretty late to that one. I wasn't aware of that until a few years ago, and now it's my number 2.
Yep. And it's interesting with George as well that the confronting lyrics on that album, you would expect someone like John to be throwing those out. On Rubber Soul, it was George again with that song Think for Yourself, which is pretty confronting as well. So George is there with the, you know.
Great point. For somebody whose image was the man who fully embraced the Eastern mysticism and was Mr. Be Here Now, you know, calm, be calm, clear your mind, etc. He's like, well, actually, I've got some things in my mind, so I'll tell you. And
yeah, amazing.
And maybe that gave him the potency to speak forthrightly.
Yeah.
But not pitch his tent there. You know, he could keep going.
Absolutely. Where's your number 2, mate?
It's got to be I'm Only Sleeping. Just what an amazing song. It's, for me, it was not a song that 50 or is it 60 years ago that I got into, but this is something I've got into more in the past 10 years, and particularly since about 2009 with the release of the box sets and stuff. And I've gone, yeah, this is one of those amazing little tunes which has got a brilliant lyric, and some wonderful guitar sounds which are played backwards. So a touch of the experimentation in there as well. So very smart tune.
Cool. My number 2, Wes, I'm following you again from before, Eleanor Rigby. Everything that you said about Eleanor Rigby, I echo. Magnificent song. I love the strings on it. Just this idea that Paul comes up to George Martin and says, I want this, I want that. And next thing you know, Got to Get You Into My Life is born. From those outtakes, Got to Get You Into My Life was with the organ. And next thing you know, there were all these strings there and sounding fantastic. Eleanor Rigby with that string arrangement. Obviously, George Martin had his hand in it and scored the thing, and it just sounds magnificent. It's timeless, in my opinion. That's my number 2, Eleanor Rigby. Before we get to number 1, boys, why don't we have a crack at what we think our least favourite song is from that album? Martin?
Oh, goodness. There are a handful of songs that haven't particularly resonated with me, so I won't name them particularly, but one that I actually don't like, as opposed to don't care about, is Here, There and Everywhere. And I think particularly referring to the lyric of Eleanor Rigby, where every line is so perceptive and insinuates so much depth and so much detail that isn't actually spoken. And it leaves you thinking, Here, There and Everywhere is just lyrically insipid to me, and melodically easy listening. I think they could do things that were more potent. Maybe that was intentional, to leaven some of the more challenging facets of what they were doing with pushing the boundaries of the sounds and what was acceptable sonically and with some of the other things they were saying. So, yeah, sorry about that. Here, There and Everywhere.
Yep, it's one of those songs that they were kind of a tribute to the Beach Boys. I heard Paul talking a while ago saying that that's their tribute to the Beach Boys, and you can tell by the harmonies, harmonies
Fair
they
point.
had there.
Fair point.
Great. But obviously it's such an album, in my opinion, that it's very hard to find a dud. But Wes, you've got a few there that you're trying to toss.
Oh yeah. I would love to toss 5 tracks from the record.
Wow.
5, and it's kind of like I tried to find what was on the American version of the album, and I had no luck at that. Maybe I should have looked at Discogs. But the things I'd like to toss were I Want to Tell You, Dr. Robert, Love You Too, She Said, and Sorry Martin, and Your Bird Can Sing.
Oh.
They're the 5 which I just go, why are they even there?
Okay.
Huge.
Sorry, guys. It's like, what are they? It's like they're not even palate cleansers. And which Here, There and Everywhere is. Not even, it's just filler, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
And I go, it's only Wes's opinion. And and remember, I'm the bloke who comes out of the singles background, okay? So they're probably wonderful album tracks, but they just don't cut it for me.
No, fair enough.
In the modern day, some of these 2-minute songs would be 4 minutes or 3.5 minutes. And
yes.
so the album, 14 songs at 35 minutes, those songs are short.
Yes.
Whereas nowadays, to try and get a song at 2 minutes, you've got to work incredibly hard to be that concise, let alone have 2 guitar solos in the song as well as deep and meaningful words. So, at another time with longer songs, maybe they would have trimmed it a little. I don't know.
Had the 3rd guitar solo.
Cool. For me, I've been a big George fan all the way through this countdown, but I'm afraid "Love You Too" is the third George song that was on the album. It's not one of my favourites. It's going to take me a while to really get stuck into that sort of stuff, but I consider Revolver to be, I don't know, bordering on a masterpiece. So I found it really hard, but "Love You Too," I can safely say it's my least favourite on the album, and one that I'm happy to revisit in order to get more acquainted with it.
Oh, you're too kind.
Well, I love the album, so
Here's a question. There's new version of Revolver that's come out with the 5 disc set. It includes the non-album single, which had Rain and Paperback Writer on it. So to me, I'm like, why didn't they include those two on the record? Just like with Sgt. Pepper's, if they put Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane, it would have elevated an incredible album to a genius level.
Yeah.
So what would you do would you include Rain and Paperback Writer on this album? And if you would, where would you put them?
Well, I'd take out the 5 that I mentioned. No, but seriously, the Beatles were, the policy was that if you put out a single, you didn't put it on the album. Like the Americans were very different. And they just mixed some of the tracks from their albums and put on the singles. But in the UK, there's very few singles that were on Beatles albums. They were albums. Like the single market and the album market were completely different. And so you never mixed them. So what financially that meant, you got 2 bites of the cherry. You got your 10 shillings or $1 back in the day for the single. And then you got your, my goodness, what was £3 or something for the other? I can't remember.
Yeah, $6 that would be.
Yeah, something like that.
It was released after the conversion to dollars and cents, just.
Yeah.
So yeah.
In Australia. Yeah.
In Australia, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's right. So I reckon Rain would be a good opener. Put it before Taxman, and then it would actually flow nicely into Taxman. And I put Paperback Writer, maybe ditch Dr. Robert or I Want to Tell You.
There you go. We agree, Martin. On some of the throwaways.
Well, like I Want to Tell You, so read it. I'll get there.
But what an incredible song Paperback Writer is, apart from the unusual a cappella beginning and all of it, it just takes off in quite a remarkable way. That's a song which found, I guess, is very difficult to head to the top back in the day. I'm not even sure if it made #1, but wow, what a song. It's we certainly get a lot of requests for it on 45 RPM. And I find that intriguing after all this time.
I have to tell you about something very curious that I found on the internet, which was there's a gentleman by the name of Mark Vidler who runs Go Home Productions in the UK, and he's famous for his mashups. So he'll take like Who, Barbara O'Reilly backing track and a Madonna Ray of Light song and mix them together. So it sounds like Madonna is singing with the Who backing her up, and things like Sex Pistols and Janet Jackson. And what he did was he got the Monkees, I'm a Believer, and the Beatles, Paperback Writer, and did this mashup called Paperback Believer. And I'm listening to this, and it's like you're in the Twilight Zone. And it's like, this is a crime. You are not allowed to make the Beatles sound better. The combination, the Monkees and the Beatles and their alternating parts and the guitar lines from both bands are intertwining, and it actually improves the Beatles. And I'm like, no, this is not possible. But somehow, good luck finding it. It's very, very, very hard to find. But
Cool.
yeah. So credit to Mark Vidler, Go Home Productions, Paperback Believer.
Awesome. Is that found on YouTube, Martin?
I
know you said it was hard to find, but
yeah. So the audio by itself, I don't know if you can actually get it anywhere, but there is a clip.
okay.
Again, he's mashed the two clips together. I'm assuming that he can't make any money out of it because of copyright issues. But what an amazing achievement!
Yeah, sounds interesting. All right, boys, let's get to our number one, our favourite song from the Revolver album. Martin, starting with you.
Well, there's not much left to say about this one because you guys have already said it. It's Eleanor Rigby, number one for me. Still remember as a 5-6-year-old hearing this song and the lyrics, even as a child. You know, you can picture a lonely church minister without a congregation to preach to. You can picture a lonely lady who hasn't got people to come and visit. And just so poignant and powerful. I did read that Paul McCartney was inspired regarding the arrangement after watching the movie Psycho, and the film soundtrack by Bernard Herrmann really resonated with him. So he went to George Martin and talked with him about that. And I had to listen to the theme from Psycho, couldn't pick it, but apparently that's the true story. Maybe it's a different part of the soundtrack, but incredible song. Eleanor Rigby.
Cool. Wes?
Earlier I said I had two prisms or two lenses that I looked through songs on, and the pop one gave me Eleanor Rigby, which turned up at number 3 on my experimental list. But on my experimental list, it's Tomorrow Never Knows, which has been mentioned before. It's the final cut on the record. It's the culmination of all the, maybe it's just out of the placement, but I think it's the culmination of the studio experimentation on the song. And a word that I used to love using in the 1970s, this is the avant-garde. And it really is the Beatles not just tipping their hat into the avant-garde, but taking the whole body in and swimming. You know, wonderful. It's just superb.
Perfect.
Agreed.
Cool. Well, my number one, I'm a sucker for chamber pop, baroque pop, whatever you want to call it. It's Paul again doing this amazing thing. It's For No One, my favourite song on the album. This,
Wow.
I just love it. It's a magnificent song. And I'm also a sucker for a French horn.
Yes. Such
And
a hard instrument to play.
Yeah. And it just fits perfectly with the song. It's Paul at his, how would I put it? You know, his deadpan, dead eyes, whatever you want to call it, that vocal that evokes just an absolute finish to a relationship. She doesn't care anymore. It's all over. And he just delivers it perfectly. And the music accompanies it to perfection. So that's my number one, For No One. Boys, have we got any other comments that you want to make about it?
So earlier I said that singles were often not listed from albums or lifted from albums. But how come Yellow Submarine and Eleanor Rigby, were?
I was going to ask
what's
you
that?
Yeah.
Exactly. I think I asked that earlier, and I just couldn't get an answer about that. I think it was because maybe they were looking for a single at the time, and
Did they come out before?
It may have come out before the album was released.
But it's highly unusual for singles.
To
be both album and single. And I know Gotta Get You Into My Life came out later in the 1970s as single. And but that was kind of like, must have been around about the time of the Hey Jude projects and stuff like that. So who knows?
Yeah, so that was one that was different to the norm. Were there any others like on Sergeant Pepper that were released as a single? I don't think so.
I don't think there was anything official. I know radio would often play Will or Help from My Friends and the opening theme. But that was about it. Maybe, and some radio stations played When I'm 64, but outside of Australia and America and the UK, I think everyone kept to, we're just playing the album cut.
Yeah.
And I remember the old 2UW, 2SM, because there was no album charts at the time to really talk about that were published anyway. There might have been album mentions, but there it was, Sergeant Pepper #1 on the singles chart, and that eventually led to people, yeah, let's do this. And the album chart doesn't have to just be Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass and Sound and Music and Maine, and Paul Moriarty and his orchestra with James Last.
So what you're saying is at that point...
Don't tune up the James Last.
Sorry, I apologise to your parents then.
I'm going to wear...
So what you're saying, Wes, is that Sergeant Pepper, the album, outsold the top single that week.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right, so that obviously justifies.
That was the changeover.
Yeah.
That was the changeover.
Yeah.
Like, there were good selling albums before, and this was certainly a wonderful thing. But it was at the time where mono was winning, so to speak, and you went and you got your mono version of the album.
Yeah.
And particularly if your little record player was also used to playing your 7-inch singles. Mm-hmm. And you'd have to have a different stylus if you were going to play stereo.
Yeah.
And that might mean that you were, for example, probably more into jazz than classical, because that's what stereo was. It was the mono.
Stereo was for people who are serious about it.
Yeah, but
they weren't casual listeners. They were listening with intention.
But with due respect to the Beatles, they weren't serious about their stereo at all, and it was such a throwaway. And can you tell me, because I haven't heard the on the what is it, 5 CD set of this. I've listened to the standard version of things, and because that's what I think is great. That's the core of the album for me, rather than the individual, how the songs developed. Is there any difference between the length of the mono versions, which are on one of the discs, and the stereo versions, which are on the standard disc?
Not that I noticed, Wes. I didn't notice any significant differences, but I'll have to go back and actually check that, because that's a good question.
Because, things like Love You Too, for example, is up against the 2009 pressing. There's 10 seconds difference. And with Dr. Robert, that is longer as well in mono. Again, up against the 2009 mono stuff, there's a difference in length between the mono of 2009 and the stereo of 2009 of many songs. And that then is reflected in what's happening here in the 2009 stereo. In other words, what was the reference? Was it the stereo version, and they've just made the length of the 2022 things match the length of the 2009 or 1960 whatever version? Or have they gone and said, hey, the mono was the approved version, let's do the stereo and try and match it around that, but to the length of the stereo version back in the day? I don't know. Does anybody know?
Yeah. Well, I'm just looking at it now, Wes, having
Yeah.
a look. Love You Too, the one you mentioned earlier, 3:08 on the mono version and 3 minutes flat on the stereo version.
There you go.
So I think you might have a point there. There are some telling differences in terms of time. So
Okay, all right. So in other words, the mono versions on the 2022 are reflecting the mono of what was originally recorded back in the 60s, and the stereos are reflecting the length, if not the mixes of the day. So they're two individual different mixes now of, in other words, the 2022s are totally new mixes, but of the same length of what the original mono and the original stereos were.
well, the mono's the same mix. It was just remastered. So the mono stays the same in terms of the length of the songs because they weren't remixed, unless they did something with the fading and all that sort of stuff. But the remixes of the 2022 stereo, that's where it comes into play, I guess. But I'll just have a quick look at the 2009, which is 3 minutes flat as well. So the 2009 stereo mix is 3 minutes, as well as the 2022 stereo mix is 3 minutes. So that hasn't changed in terms of the length, but there is a difference between the length of the mono and the stereo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Aren't we nerds?
Oh, totally. Totally.
Well,
It's like we've got to do something, here to
to justify our existence in the universe.
Yes.
That's right. That's right.
It's
Yeah,
like,
important stuff,
this one's
right?
a little bit different from that one. Yeah.
oh, and how many different versions are there of all this now? It's like, hey,
Hey, look. Someone
I've got
cares.
the 2009 version.
Someone cares, and we are here to look after them. So,
Yeah.
there you go.
And I've got the 2022, and I've got, you might be able to see up the back there, the box set of mono as well. And somewhere I've got vinyl as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, hey, mate, I'm a nerd.
You have the USA editions box set?
Oh, no, I haven't. But I tell you what, the mixes, at least in mono, are different.
Yeah,
are often different in mono than the UK versions of Revolver.
Of course they are.
Wow.
Of course they are. And who's remastering and reissuing those?
I don't know. I'm going to have to go and
Apple.
buy them.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Sorry to remind you.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that just about wraps it up, boys.
I think so.
Fantastic, fascinating. Thanks for checking us out, guys. Please check out the link to where you can find Wes's 45 RPM program, as well as some of his previous shows, which are on there as well. And we really appreciate you adding your comment by letting us know your favourite Revolver songs as well. So I hope you enjoyed today's offering. We'd love you to give us the old thumbs up and to subscribe to Let It Spin. So we'll see.
And if you think we're nerds, you can tell us that too.
Correct. We'll see you next time, guys.
Bye.